So guys, I've been wanting to do this video for a very long time, and I really want to say that Konosuke Takashita is probably going to be the next big star of AEW if he's booked right. And there are a lot of really great things going for him. He has a really great look, he has really badass entrance music, he has really great matches, and unlike Will Ospreay, I really feel that his match style is not as reckless. And I also just like how he and Bandito are both able to have really great matches, but they're almost at the point where, just like with Mercedes, that they kind of know when to have good matches, but to not also be like overly featured on television. Because one bad thing about people like Will Ospreay is that I've always said he's like a Roman gladiator, and what I mean by that is that with Roman gladiators, sometimes they have matches and other stuff like once a year, and that's actually really really good. You want to kind of, when you're really a really good wrestler, you want to minimize how many matches that you have, really. And that's very very important, really. You don't want to be that person that's like, okay, well, I have great matches, so I'm going to wrestle every single week, really, because then you have a diminishing return. Like, why does CM Punk have a majority of his matches on WWE television, really? Now, why does he have a majority of his matches on the pay-per-views? Why do some wrestlers like John Cena only wrestle on the pay-per-views? Because they know how to consolidate, really. And then also, with AEW, they do things a lot differently. And I think this is one of the big things, that he could be the IWGP champion. He could also hold a title from DDT Wrestling and even like AEW or ROH, really. So when you have a wrestler that is kind of like accomplished throughout the world, they're traveling a lot, really. I like that because, with WWE, what they usually do is that a wrestler has to work for WWE and that's it, really. So unless you have that partnership with TNA Wrestling, really. But more than likely, you're always going to see a WWE wrestler with a WWE title. When you have wrestlers from different companies, you're like, that's kind of intriguing that they're holding this title or that title, and it helps them become legit opponents. Sometimes you run into a Mercedes Moné situation where it's a little cartoonish, that she has 9 different titles. And then you run into situations like Kurt Angle in TNA Wrestling, when he was like when he had multiple belts, really, and they treated it like a big deal, really. There are ways to book a wrestler that does a lot of work on the independents, and there's a way to book a wrestler that wins a lot of titles on the independents, and then there's a way not to book them. So I really feel that with Konosuke Takashita, quite honestly, there's some stories that you can tell with him, and I think that's one of the other big reasons that, honestly, you can do something like Don Callis, like, has a celebration for his G1 win, and they should have done that for Forbidden Door, and he says something like, you can have the G1 trophy, you can have all, like, the streamers and everything like that, really, to say, hey, this is a big deal, and what this means, and what the IWGP title means, to have that and be part of that lineage. And also say that there's wrestlers like AJ Styles and Brock Lesnar and other ones that have become bigger and greater by holding that title, like even John Moxley. So it's an important accomplishment. Then he can say something like, my reward for you is that I want to get you ready for Zack Sabre Jr. So the next couple of months, I'm going to be talking to people who have been former IWGP champions or who have a great lineage in Japan, and you're going to have matches with them because we got to get you ready. We got to bring that IWGP title to Don Callis family. So you can do Takeshita versus Okada. You can do Takeshita versus Kenny Omega, Takeshita versus Chris Jericho, Takeshita versus John Moxley, Takeshita versus Bryan Danielson, because he did wrestle in Japan for a while. And you keep going down that list, really. And then you have a bunch of opponents in great matches. And I ultimately would say that there's 2 ways. Don Callis can hire people to get them ready, or he can do something like he can have like a beatdown on Bryan Danielson, or have Takeshita do that if you want to make him a heel, really. And then there's also something that you can do. That you can do something where you do Bryan Danielson versus Takeshita. They have a great match, and then maybe Takeshita says to himself, you know what? I really like, the audience. I like people praising me. And people know that I'm a good guy, really. So he probably learns that maybe the Don Callis family's not a right fit. So you're almost like repeating what you did with Will Ospreay, really, where you're kind of like saying maybe I don't need to be in a villain stable, really. Or maybe he's like, you know what, even though, I'm not as ruthless, I still want to support my group, really, because they've helped me stand out, or they're going to have my back, really, because they're still like evil and other like wrestlers in Japan that could be like, okay, we're going to fuck up the main event. So therefore, Takeshi doesn't get the title because of a no contest. So there's some stories that you can do, really. And then there's also a story where maybe you do something where Takeshita has a change of heart, really. And he's like, I want to be a good guy. And he disbands the Don Callis family. So imagine him wrestling Okada, Wardlow, and a couple of other wrestlers in the Don Callis family, Hechishiro and other ones that can have great matches. And he's kind of like, I want to wrestle with these guys because they're actually the good guys. Because they're actually, they're actually, they're actually wrestlers that he can have great matches with. Or you do something where maybe he and Kenny Omega become a tag team, or Takeshita and Will Ospreay, or Takeshita and Swerve, or something like that. Like, there's a lot of just, things that you can kind of do with him. So I think that the potential is there. But I also think the other thing I like about Takeshita is that he's not as reckless. Like, I don't see him doing something like having a steel cage match with Kyle Fletcher and doing a Blue Thunder Bomb off the steel cage onto the announce table. Or I don't see him... Like, and also he's a good wrestler as well, really. Because I think with Ospreay, one of the problems is that an Ospreay match that goes on way too much, way longer than it needs to be. And also the other issue with Ospreay matches is that he takes things a little too far, really. Like, you saw him, do the Spanish fly off the cage with Kyle Fletcher. There's issues, they may have neck issues, but he always seems to kind of overdo it. And I think with Takeshita, he kind of is that person. I think he's a little bit more conservative. Like, he'll go far, but he will not be like, okay, well, I'm going to, as I said, do a Blue Thunder Bomb off the steel, off like a 20-foot cage onto the announce table, or I'm going to wrestle Okada and he's going to hit me with a bunch of Tiger drivers and I'm going to keep going for another 30 minutes. When that's just too much, really. Like, he knows when to have a limit on something. And then I also think that another thing you can do, too, is that he's married to, I think, Yuka Sakazaka, like, the magical girl. You can do something where maybe the Don Callis family harasses her, or maybe she kind of motivates him to be a good guy. And he's like, I'm thinking about my woman, really. And he can also do something where, like, they said something like he called his mom, really. You can have her or something like that. So you can almost kind of do, like, the Rurouni Kenshin type of thing, really, where, like, you can have him as Kenshin and have her, like, Miss Karu type of thing, where, like, where he's like, what, Don Callis is going to harass her or interfere in a match, or they're going to bring a woman in it, like Nyla Rose or somebody else to be like, okay, we're going to fuck with your woman, really. And now he's almost like Kenshin, where he digs into that deeper energy, really. Or he's kind of like, okay, well, she believes in me, she loves me, she knows that deep down I'm a good person, but I'm with these series of villains, really. So where's my heart? Is my heart with my woman, or is my heart with my boys, really? So you can kind of do a storyline about, like, the power of love, really. Powerful shit, really. About, like, how like sometimes you need the love of a woman to change you. Or like sometimes I said the most powerful thing in the world is the love from a woman. And that could change a really conflicted man, really. So there's a lot of just things that you can do with him. And there's a lot of really just great stories and matches that you can tell, really. And I also really would say that I think they're at the point where they need, like another generation of the new four pillars. And I think that what I would say is, Konosuke Takashita, Brodito with Bandito and Brody King. I would also say Anthony Bowens, because he's very emphatic, and he just needs a lot of work, really. I just don't think he's a lost cause yet. And I also think the four pillar is, like, Adam Page, really, because I think with Adam Page, again, he's not really been kind of booked that well, really. So you've not really shown what you can do with him, so you can kind of work really hard with him and make him into something. So, there's a lot you can do with Konosuke Takeshita, or you can do something like he and Shelton have matched, because Shelton's actually wrestled in Japan. But there's a lot of great opponents that you can do, really. Like, I think that there's so much that you can do with Konosuke Takeshita. What would happen if you make the Don Callis family? What would happen if he leads the Don Callis family? His best friend's Kyle Fletcher, really. So what would happen if he and Kyle Fletcher was like, you know what, you betrayed the family. I hate you. You know what, we're actually really, really close, really, So you might almost be like kind of copycatting or repeating or rehashing Kyle Fletcher and Kyle Fletcher and Osprey, but I think because they're way more closer, I think that what happened was with Osprey, Osprey and Fletcher was really bad. Fletcher feeling overshadowed by Osprey, but Takeshi's more like, you know what, if you have Takeshi disband the Don Callis family, it's almost like, you know what, we were close, you betrayed us, and there's consequences because you don't betray a rival organization or whatever, so all that good stuff. And as I said, or you're going to do something where you have a rivalry between him and Okada, and the loser leads the Don Callis family, because it's almost like, they keep fighting and they're counterproductive by working with each other. So, like I said, there's so many things you can do with Takeshita, and I really just think that, there's a lot of great matches and there's a box office draw to it.